Hello folks, welcome to another video. In this one I'm going to be looking at whether it's worth upgrading from an RTX 2080, not the Super or the TI version, and then bringing that up to an RTX 4070. Now I'm going to be using Starfield as an example of this. Unfortunately, I'll have to pause the video here. I've installed the NVIDIA app and it's kind of played around with my settings a little bit here. Made everything a bit weird, so I'm just going to adjust that and come back. Okay, and we're back. So I've now pumped all the settings right up to ultra with frame generation on. This isn't a hugely demanding area, but I'm getting depends between 120 and 150 FPS. So we'll move to some of the more demanding areas to see the difference in this game. So for reference, before I would have maybe been able to hit 120 FPS with the 2080, but obviously that would have been with a lower graphics settings mode on there. So we'll go ahead and jump to, let's say, Aquila and have a look at the performance difference there. So this is Aquila City. And in this section here, which isn't the most demanding part, I'm getting 115 FPS. Now, I wouldn't mean getting that previously. The frame rate does fluctuate quite heavily. And it's worth noting I'm playing everything on Ultra, which perhaps you could say probably isn't really, you don't really need it, that frame rate, that graphic settings. But we're getting about 100 FPS here. So if I come in now and I go into settings, and perhaps I just ping a load of these things down to high. More than likely you won't even notice any difference at all, to be honest. So let's have a look. Click them all down to high, basically. Now, you might be thinking, why is he using FSR3? Because right now, for some reason, this game flits between liking DLSS frame generation and not liking it, and FSR3 frame gen works fine. So I thought I'm going to have to use that. So it makes a tiny improvement to FPS. You get 109 or so now. It's a minuscule improvement really. But I can't say I'm noticing a huge difference in graphics. So maybe I'll leave it on high. But to be honest, this is the worst performing area of the game, and I don't think there's much you can do really to claw much that FPS back in this area besides really killing your settings. So I wouldn't say that's worth it. So in terms of Starfield, it's definitely worth getting the RTX 4070 as an upgrade to the RTX 2080. So let's try another game. This game is fairly demanding, and in the past has had issues with frame stutters and whatnot. It doesn't have frame generation built in, but we'll have a quick play of it and see how the frame rate holds up now. And having said that, going from FSR3 with frame gen back to DLSS with frame gen now seems to be working just fine. So go figure. In terms of performance though, DLSS is marginally better than FSR3, but image quality I would argue is definitely better, except for some of the water here where it looks quite pixelated really, but perhaps that's a glitch. Anyway, on to the next game. So another game I'd like to show you here is Dead Space. Now this game certainly has its share of issues, including wildly fluctuating frame rates. So for example, right now I'm getting 85 FPS. I'll show you the settings that I'm running it at. I do feel that you should get higher really. So 120 Hz refresh rate at 1080p. Vertical sync is turned off because I can't hit the 120 FPS apparently. And high dynamic range is on automatic. Other settings that you got, for example, I turned film grain off because I don't really like it. You got dynamic resolution scaling and DLSS on performance mode. I have got ray tracing enabled, although I can't imagine there's a huge amount that is benefiting from that, and everything else is turned to high. So right now, in this sort of corridor, I'm getting 87 FPS, but it does fluctuate heavily, down to like as low as 50 for seemingly no reason. So if we go into a bigger area here, have a little float about. This is probably about the worst performance you're going to get with all the debris and whatnot floating around in here. So I get about 80 FPS. I do feel like we should be getting more, to be honest with you. Having said that, it does look good still, and it does have ray tracing enabled. Obviously turning that off would save me some frame rate, but not an enormous amount. Where is it gone? These creatures are horrible, aren't they? Yeah, probably not the best gun for zero gravity. This gun seems to take a long time to kill him. But yes, I would highly recommend perhaps getting the mod that introduces frame generation into this game. I think it's quite frankly crazy that these developers bring these games out for PC and don't include frame generation. You know, if some modder chap can do it and he does it in his spare time and charges a tiny bit of money on Patreon, I just think it's a pretty poor show at the state of affairs when the developers can't or won't do it. I think it's not a good look, really. But there we go. So let's go ahead and crank all this to Ultra and see what we get. There we go, let's have a look. So it seems to have killed our frame rate all the way down to like 40, but then it seems like once the game loads everything back in, the frame rate goes back up again. It's a very strange thing here because it's supposed to do a pre-compilation shader thing at the start. It really seemed to work properly. Again, the game is very good and it's a cool game and whatnot, but I mean, you shouldn't be getting these frame rate stutters. Especially when you're testing your new graphics card and you load into an area and you're getting 50 FPS, and then once you start running around, it does jump up. Now, the stutters don't seem to be as bad as they used to be, but it could still be better because it will fluctuate quite heavily. Also, I really don't like this menu system where you have to use your scroll wheel to move between all the things. I suppose it does enable you to still look around and whatnot. But let's say I want to equip this gun now. I have to then take my hand off the mouse and I have to enter. I mean, you can move around with the arrow keys, but again, it's not ideal, is it really? I'm sure there's a way of changing your weapon with this. Oh, there we go. I have found it. I'll give them that. You can do it with the numbers keys, so I suppose that's better. But with ray tracing on, it is a pretty good looking game, to be honest with you. But I do think it could be better. And some of the key layouts on here are a bit odd. I can't even remember which key it is now to change. So let's see, hold that and then you press space. Okay. Oh, maybe that's partly on me. But I really do wish I could hit 120 FPS. I'm going to have to use the frame generation mod. Yeah, and I shouldn't have to be paying for mods to make the games run as they should. But this is a game where EA were the publisher, and I'll maybe just leave that at that. So we'll try out one more game to see the difference that this graphics card can bring to your computer. We'll do that now. Okay, so we've opened up The Witcher here, and I'll have a look at the graphics. Got ray tracing on, all quality, DLSS on balanced, with low sharpening, and we've also got motion blur on, but not really high. I don't like chromatic aberration. I do like light shafts though, don't ask me why. Got NVIDIA Hairworks on, everything else is set for Ultra, not Ultra Plus. I can't really see any difference, to be honest, so I don't think it's worth it. And with we've got 1080p. We've got 120 frames per second maximum. DLSS frame gen on. Low latency mode is on as well. So we'll go ahead and jump into the game and just have a look at the difference it makes. Okay, so we're in, and as you can see, the vegetation and whatnot is really nice. This is a game that came out in 2015, I believe, and with these upgrades, it does look really nice, to be honest with you. And it's worth noting, yeah, I'm not hitting a solid 120 FPS the whole time, but I am running here with ray tracing. Now I could probably knock a couple of settings down if I went into video, graphics. Maybe I could turn ray tracing down to performance. Let's have a look. And now we're at a locked 120 FPS. So it's probably worth doing that. Oftentimes the quality settings, unless you're really looking at it, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference. But essentially we're sitting at 120 FPS most of the time. Areas like Novigrad can knock it down a bit. And of course you can knock some of the graphics settings down from ultra to high and whatnot, and you'll still have a really good looking game. To be honest, Ultra Plus is probably for maybe a 4080 graphics card. I'm not sure it's worth spending the extra money unless you're going to play at 4K. But even then, I think 4K 120Hz might still be a bit of a push. The game does suffer from tiny amounts of stuttering, not an awful amount, and the mouse movement isn't the smoothest I've seen. But here we go, we can approach here and have a look at the ray tracing. So this is on performance mode with reflections and whatnot. So if we jump back into the graphics settings and we go to video, graphics, and then we look at ray tracing, we stick that onto quality. Let's have a look at the difference. It does impact our frame rate a tiny bit in areas, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not noticing a huge difference in the graphical quality there. Let's just have another look. I can't really see any difference, to be honest with you. I'd probably leave that on performance unless you have a really high-end system. It's also worth mentioning I don't have resizable bar on here, as this is running on an Intel 9th gen CPU. Doesn't seem to impact my performance too much in terms of like CPU bottlenecking and whatnot, but it will impact your performance in terms that you can't have resizable bar, so that'll probably do you for about 10 FPS maybe. Also, frame generation can introduce a slight bit of flicker around Geralt. Now if you were looking around the area like this, you probably won't really notice it, but if you stand still like this and you move it slowly around him, there's slight flicker around his legs and that, from the reconstruction techniques. Overall though, I would say it is worth upgrading to an RTX 4070 from a 2080. If for no other reason than to gain access to NVIDIA's DLSS frame generation. Sadly, AMD's frame generation software is not in anywhere near as many games yet, although I've got to say, in terms of performance and graphics, it isn't a million miles behind. So it'd be nice to see it get into more games. Unfortunately, currently it seems to be requiring modifications to get these stuff into the games. It shouldn't really be that way. Should probably actually have developers going back, taking a bit more pride in their games maybe, and just chucking this in. They say, oh, there's a cost involved, and perhaps there is, but if an individual person with a job and whatnot is able to do the modifications himself, one person, I think a large company should be able to do it. It's good for PR, it's good for the games. If you put out the statement on your social media that you've just added in ray tracing or DLSS or FSR3, something like that, people are quite likely to go on things like Steam and quickly buy the game to have a look at it and have a look at the graphics, or they'll even go on there and they'll put the game, install it back on their system, and then share on social media how good it looks or how much better the frame rate is. This is all free advertising for minimal money, and it's just disappointing that some companies don't put it in there. It's nice to have DLSS frame generation in this game, for example, but it would also be nice if they put FSR3 in there. There is another couple of companies that do graphics cards, namely Intel and AMD, and I think it would be nice to include them, seeing as I know Nvidia have the greatest market share, and I do have an Nvidia GPU, as I said, and I do think it does a good job in that, but Nvidia's almost monopoly has enabled them to put prices up to what I would say are ridiculous levels. For example, a 4090 costing £1,500, or even a 4080 costing £1,000. When I purchased this, the 2080 originally, that was £700, and that was basically the top of the line performance at the time. So over the course of two generations, it's gone up by £300. That's a big increase in price, and I honestly think Nvidia, because of their market share, are able to chuck prices up higher than what they should be able to. And I think if a lot of these developers would focus on getting Intel XeSS in and AMD FSR3, Intel's market domination would shrink a little bit. Sorry, not Intel, Nvidia. Like I said, I do like Nvidia, but it would be nice to see the other companies get more of a shout out in these games. But there we go. So in answer to the question, yes, it is definitely worthwhile upgrading from a 2080 to a 4070. This is the 4070 Super. The TI is a fair amount more money, but the amount more money that they ask for doesn't actually translate to the performance. So I would say a 4070 Super from a 2080 is a good upgrade. So all that's left to say is I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to hit that like button, or dislike it if you didn't like it. Leave me a comment, subscribe to my channel, and finally share this video on your socials. That really helps to get my channel out there and hopefully grow it and whatnot. And if you really like my channel, you can go ahead and check out my Patreon of the same name, and feel free to contribute if you want. Don't worry if you don't, just thank you for watching the video. Have a great day.